Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to pull out the really essential stuff from sources you should know about. Today, we're diving into what some call the quiet revolution. We're looking deep into introversion, its power, its nuances, drawing a lot from Susan Cain's work. Okay, so our mission today. Pretty straightforward. We want you to get a really good handle, quickly, on that whole introvert-extrovert spectrum. And crucially, tell the difference between being introverted and just being shy. Plus, find ways to tap into that energy you get from, well, quiet and thinking things through. We're pushing back against this, constant pressure to be on all the time.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how central this idea of temperament is in the source material. It's not just a minor personality thing. Introversion, extroversion, they're described as, like the north and south of temperament. Really fundamental to who we are. And the main message is about congruence. Basically, if you set up your life, your work, whatever, in a way that fits your natural temperament, you unlock huge amounts of energy. But, and this is the important bit, if you fight it all the time, say you're an introvert who feels forced into constant high-energy social events, that doesn't just drain you. It can lead to real burnout. So understanding this is, well, it's key for thriving long-term.
Okay, let's break that down. Maybe do a quick self-check. Using some characteristics from the sources, you might lean introvert if, say, you generally prefer talking one-on-one rather than in big groups, or if you feel like you express yourself better writing things down. And yeah, if you actually enjoy being alone sometimes, oh, and this is a big one. You hate small talk, right? But you could talk for hours about something you find meaningful. You're probably a good listener too. Maybe not a huge risk taker. And you definitely feel wiped out after a lot of socializing, even if, you actually had fun. Now, if you were ticking boxes and it was roughly half and half, well, you might be somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. That middle ground is what gets called the ambivert. If you kind of recharge sometimes from being alone, sometimes from being with people, depends on the situation.
Yeah.
That's probably you. But look, if we want real clarity here, we have to hit this major point right away. Introversion is not the same as shyness. Totally different things. Introversion is a preference. It's about choosing quieter settings, less stimulation, because that's where you feel most energized and comfortable. Shyness, on the other hand, that's a fear. It's the fear of being judged negatively by other people.
Right, and the examples make this super clear. Think about Bill Gates. Quiet guy, loves books, clearly very comfortable with his own ideas, doesn't seem bothered by what people think. That's a classic introvert, but not shy. Then you've got someone like, say, Barbara Streisand. Huge personality, loves performing, definitely an extrovert, right? But famously struggles with terrible stage fright. That's a shy extrovert. Wow, just making that distinction. It should totally change how we look at people in teams or who we think makes a good leader. But like you said, society often lumps them together. Why is that?
Well, it seems studies consistently show something interesting. People who talk fast and talk a lot, they tend to get rated as like more confident, more likable, even smarter, almost instantly. So when an introvert is quietly processing, thinking before they speak, they can look just like someone who's shy and afraid to speak up. In that kind of alpha-driven culture, being slow or quiet reads as being submissive. The pressure to be quick and loud is just huge. But here's where the quiet perspective actually finds some strength. Both people who are genuinely shy and those who are introverted often see something others miss, that this whole alpha status is overrated, and our culture's obsession with it, with the loud, dominant types, it can blind us to really good ideas, wise insights, thoughtful contributions from quieter folks. Hashtag the Introverts Manifesto and challenging cultural norms.
Okay, so if society keeps getting this wrong, how do the sources suggest we flip the script? Let's look at this Introverts Manifesto idea. Some really powerful points there. Like, you know how people sometimes dismiss someone as being in their head too much? Well, the manifesto says there's another word for that. Thinkers. Yeah, and we put risk takers on a pedestal, but maybe we need more heat takers. People who actually pause, reflect, think about consequences before jumping in. The source is really strong on this. Solitude isn't lazy or unproductive. It's actually a crucial ingredient for real innovation.
And that idea directly challenges how we set things up, doesn't it? If deep thought happens best alone, why are so many modern offices open plan? Why are classrooms designed for constant group work? Often the reason isn't about what's best for learning or thinking, it's about cost. It's cheaper to have big open offices or large group classrooms. It's not always based on the best pedagogy. Same with things like texting or email asynchronous communication. Why is it so popular? Because it fulfills this deep need for interaction that isn't face-to-face, that isn't demanding an instant response, in a world that feels overwhelmingly extroverted sometimes.
That really connects to finding work you love, doesn't it? Staying true to your nature. I like that right lighting analogy they use. For some people, the right light is a big Broadway spotlight. For others, it's just a quiet desk lamp. Finding your own light is key. And it changes how you think about things like networking, too. Maybe aiming for one genuine conversation, one real connection at an event is way more valuable than just grabbing a stack of business cards. And I love this permission slip they offer.
Yeah, it is totally okay to cross the street sometimes just to avoid that awkward small talk you hate. Hashtag practical tools for navigating an extroverted world.
Okay, let's talk about that feeling, though, that putting yourself out there,
Yeah.
fear, you know your idea is good, maybe even great, but the thought of presenting it or defending it, it's just paralyzing. The sources actually give some really helpful tools here.
The first one is kind of comforting, actually. They talk about Darwin's delay, Charles Darwin. What was he afraid of? And how long did he actually sit on his big idea? He was apparently terrified. Terrified of the judgment, especially from the church and the establishment at the time. And he waited. Get this. 34 years before publishing his theory of evolution. 34. So the comfort is, if Darwin felt that kind of fear about a world-changing idea, well, you're in pretty good company if you feel anxious about sharing your work.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are tools related more to your environment, even your body chemistry, like using a mild stimulant, coffee being the obvious one. It can apparently help quiet that inner critic, that chorus of judgers in your head. And the idea of working alone together, setting up shop in a cafe or library. You're on your own, but there's a low hum of activity. It gives you just enough stimulation so you don't feel totally isolated, but not so much that you're constantly interrupted or feel overwhelmed.
Right. And this kind of pushes back against what the source called nonsense floating around these days. This idea that all creativity has to be social, collaborative. We should remember that quote from William White. People very rarely think in groups. They do not create. Deep work often happens alone. And apparently when you work matters too. Working at night can be better. Why is that?
Yeah, the idea is that cortisol, the stress hormone, tends to peak in the morning. So later in the day or at night, your brain is physiologically less inhibited. That can lead to more creative thinking, more sort of associative leaps where you connect ideas in new ways. A more relaxed brain is often a more creative brain. And one last tool for building confidence, it sounds simple, but it's quite smart. Practice operating from a center of conviction. Start with small stuff, things that don't really matter. Like form a strong opinion about the right way to load the dishwasher and just stick to it. Practicing that feeling of knowing your own mind on small things can build the muscle for holding your ground on bigger, more important ideas later.
But okay, here's the tricky part. There's this study by Fleeson that found even introverts feel happier, more excited, more enthusiastic when they act extroverted, when they're talkative and assertive. So socializing does seem to give us a happiness boost, right?
That boost is real, yeah. Short-term acting extroverted can feel good, but there's a cost. Forcing yourself to act against your nature, that false extroversion, takes a toll. Research links it to increased stress, potential burnout, and even in more extreme long-term cases, things like higher risk of cardiovascular problems. So the question becomes, how do you get the connection you need without paying that heavy price?
Okay, so what are the alternatives? The sources suggest focusing on, 5 ways to spend time that are fulfilling but low conflict, low drain. First one, just read. Proust apparently called reading that fruitful miracle of communication in the midst of solitude. Nice phrase.
It is nice. Second, try to get into a state of flow. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's idea. That feeling of being completely absorbed in something, challenged but not overwhelmed, not bored, not anxious. For introverts, that often happens during deep, focused solo work. It's the opposite of scattered group brainstorming. Third, maybe keep a kind of informal quota for social stuff. Know your limits and give yourself permission to say no when you hit them.
Right. And fourth, focus on meaningful conversations. The research apparently shows the happiest people have way more deep, substantive talks and much less small talk compared to unhappy people, like twice as many. And finally, spend time with people you feel truly comfortable with. Those friends or family where you don't feel you don't feel anxious or overstimulated, just easy company. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and look at schools. The source mentions this teacher, Natalie Monroe, who was really open about disliking quiet students. She actually said she wished she could write things on report cards, like she just sits there emotionless, or even, shy isn't cute in 11th grade, it's annoying. Ouch.
Yeah, that's pretty harsh, but unfortunately it taps into a wider bias. Research actually backs this up. A majority of teachers apparently believe the ideal student is an extrovert, which is just staggering when you think about it. How many really influential thinkers throughout history were quiet, reflective types? Darwin, Einstein, J.K. Rowling,
Yeah.
none of them would fit that ideal student mold. We really need to rethink how we view quiet kids in the classroom.
Definitely. And this connects to the idea of raising sensitive children. They call them orchid children. These are kids who are highly sensitive to their environment. They do poorly if things are bad, but if conditions are good, they don't just do okay, they actually flourish. They do better than less sensitive kids.
Right. And the key insight here from David Dobbs's work is that these kids don't necessarily need some kind of extraordinary, perfect greenhouse upbringing. That old idea of good enough parenting from Bettelheim, that works fine. They thrive even in just pretty good conditions.
Yeah.
The important thing seems to be mirroring, basically the parent reflecting a sense of calm and confidence even when things are tough. Small, positive signals of support seem more important than trying to create a perfect, stress-free bubble.
Okay, switching to adulthood. Public speaking, still a massive hurdle for many introverts. But the source points to Malcolm Gladwell as an interesting example. He reframes it, doesn't he?
He does. Gladwell, who comes across as quite soft-spoken naturally, apparently calls public speaking a performance. It's not about being an extrovert. It's about putting on a show, in a way. He prepares meticulously, scripting every single word. He steps into a role, the storyteller role, performs it really well, and then when it's over, he can step back into his quieter self. That's the lesson, I think. You don't have to change who you are. You can learn to inhabit a role for a specific purpose, like giving a presentation, and then return to your natural state afterward. And finally, let's touch on how personality might shift over a lifetime. This idea of intrinsic maturation. Do we stay the same, or do we change as we get older? Well, the research suggests our core temperament, where we fall in that introvert-extrovert spectrum, stays remarkably stable. But our personalities do tend to mellow, like fine wine, as the source puts it. As people age, they generally tend to become a bit more introverted, maybe quieter, more self-contained, but also more emotionally stable, more agreeable, and more conscientious.
Huh. That actually makes a lot of evolutionary sense, doesn't it? Maybe being highly extroverted is really useful in young adulthood, finding partners, building a career. But later in life, maybe introspection, calmness, stability, those become more valuable for raising families, mentoring others, finding meaning.
Exactly. It's a natural shift. It might explain why some of your most intensely social friends from your 20s seem perfectly happy with a quiet Saturday night by the time they're 45. They're not forcing it. It's the natural rebalancing from that high-energy outward focus towards more internal stability and reflection. Hashtag Bad Tech Outro.
So wrapping this up, we've tried to define this temperament thing, really separate introversion from shyness, huge point there, and hopefully give you the language, maybe even the permission slip to understand yourself better, and maybe even start thinking about how to tweak your environment so you're not constantly fighting your own nature. Because ultimately, understanding your temperament isn't about changing who you are, it's about unleashing the energy you already have.
Yeah, and if you think about the whole span of life, there's this interesting idea. Maybe the main task of the first half of life is putting yourself out there, figuring things out, exploring. And maybe the task of the second half is more about making sense of it all. Where you've been, what it means. It's a continuous journey, and everyone finds their own way to shine, if they find that right lighting we talked about.
That's a powerful thought to end on. We'll leave you with that Gandhi quote that popped up in the source material. In a gentle way, you can shake the world. So maybe think about that. What gentle shake are you getting ready to make next?